You're here for the deep dive, and today we're really focusing in on a piece of hardware that's, well, getting a lot of attention. It's for gamers looking for that perfect balance, you know?
Yeah, that sweet spot.
Exactly. The Gigabyte Radeon RX 7800 XT Gaming OC, the 16 gig version. We've got a pretty detailed review here, and the mission today is pretty straightforward.
Just boil it down, right?
Yeah, extract the key stuff, see where this card actually fits in the whole picture right now.
Makes sense. And it's aimed squarely at, like, solid 1440p gaming performance, but without that top-tier flagship price tag.
Right. It slots in between the 7700 XT and the bigger 7900 XT from AMD.
That's the one, a really interesting middle ground.
So if you're maybe thinking about an upgrade, wondering if this is the card for your rig, well, we're going to break it down.
Yep. Design, cooling, performance, the works.
Build quality, features, and crucially, the value proposition. Is it worth the money? Okay, let's dive in. First impressions. What did the review say about just, picking it up?
Well, the first thing mentioned is that it feels reassuringly solid, right out of the box.
Yeah.
It's got that Gigabyte Windforce cooler, the triple fan one, and it's housed in this powder-coated black metal shroud. It's not super flashy, but it feels like quality.
Understated.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a solid aluminum backplate too, which adds to that sturdy feel and, protects the PCB.
Sounds like what a lot of people want, honestly. Something that feels premium but doesn't scream, "Look at me!" with crazy designs. The review called it understated yet classy.
That's the phrase used, yeah. And for anyone who isn't big on, like, RGB everywhere,
Which is definitely a thing.
it has a subtle LED strip, but it's optional. You can control it, turn it off entirely if you want that stealth look.
Good to have the option.
And what's interesting, kind of from an engineering standpoint, is the design seems really functional.
How so?
The review notes that the cutouts and vents, they seem purposefully placed. Like, they're really trying to maximize airflow through the heatsink.
So form follows function there.
Seems like it. That kind of detail often means better temps and stability long term.
Makes sense. It's not a small card, though, is it?
No, definitely not tiny. It's just under 300 millimeters long. So yeah, you'll want to check your case clearance. Needs a decent mid-tower or, ideally, a full tower.
Good tip. And power connectors. Standard stuff.
Yep, 2 standard 8-pin PCIe power connectors. And they're placed pretty conveniently, apparently. The reviewer also mentioned the PCB quality, the soldering looked pretty good. Hints at maybe some overclocking potential later.
Okay, interesting. So build quality sounds good, but the crucial thing with a graphics card is always cooling and noise, right?
Yeah.
How does that Windforce system hold up?
Absolutely key. And yeah, the Windforce system seems like a real highlight here. It's got those 3 80mm fans, and they use that alternate spinning direction trick.
Right, where the middle fan spins opposite the outer ones.
Exactly. The idea is it cuts down on air turbulence, makes the airflow smoother and more direct onto the heatsink below. Plus, it uses 3 composite copper heat pipes to pull the heat away from the GPU itself.
Okay, sounds like a solid design. What about the actual results? Temps?
The numbers look really good. For typical 1440p gaming, the review pegs the GPU temp somewhere between like 60 and 65 degrees Celsius.
That's really quite cool, actually.
Yeah, it's a great range. And even when they pushed it hard with stress tests, like Firmark, it only peaked around 75 degrees C.
Impressive. Keeps its cool under pressure.
It does. And maybe just as important for the gaming experience is the noise.
Definitely. Don't want a jet engine next to you.
Exactly. The measurement was around 38 decibels, dBA, at 1 meter, which is, pretty quiet. It should just blend into the background during gaming.
Nice.
Plus, it has that semi-passive fan mode. So when you're just browsing or watching videos, doing light stuff.
The fans stop spinning.
Yep, they can slow right down or stop completely. So near silent operation for general desktop use.
That's a huge bonus. A lot of people use their gaming PCs for everything. So sounds like the cooling really hits a good balance. Performance without excessive noise.
Seems like it, yeah. They've balanced the thermals and acoustics really well.
Okay, let's talk power then. How thirsty is this card, and how does that relate back to the heat?
So the official board power rating is 275 watts. Puts it firmly in the mid-range for current GPUs.
Okay. Not super low, but not crazy high either.
Exactly. In those really intense stress tests, the whole system pulled about 325 watts max. The card itself was likely pulling somewhere around maybe 270 watts of that.
Right.
But even drawing that much power, like we just said, the cooling handles it really effectively.
Yeah, those temps prove it. Shows the
Right.
cooler's doing its job well. The review also mentioned the voltage regulation, didn't it? Something about 10+2 phase.
It did, yeah. A 10 plus 2 phase VRM setup.
Which, for people listening, basically means
Think of it as the power delivery system for the GPU chip itself. A 10 plus 2 phase design is pretty beefy, pretty robust. It means it can deliver cleaner, more stable power.
which is good for.
Well, it's crucial for just stable performance during intense gaming, but it also gives you a better foundation if you do want to try overclocking, less chance of instability.
Okay, makes sense.
And because of that and the overall power draw, the recommendation is for good quality 650 watt power supply.
650W. Okay,
Yeah, it gives you enough headroom for the CPU and everything else without being totally overkill.
sensible advice. All right, the moment of truth then. How does this thing actually game, particularly at 1440p, which you said is its target?
Yeah, this is really where it's designed to perform, and the review gives some good examples. In demanding AAA games, think Cyberpunk 2077, Forza Horizon 5, Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
The big hitters.
Right. At 1440p with ultra settings, it's consistently hitting between 60 and 80 frames per second.
Okay, that's very playable. Smooth.
Definitely. It apparently only dips into the high 50s in the absolute, most demanding scenes in those games.
That's solid performance for ultra settings at 1440p.
Yeah.
What about folks with high refresh rate monitors? Can it push higher frames in less demanding games?
Oh, yeah. For lighter titles or just better optimized ones, like Fortnite or Overwatch 2.
Esports stuff.
Exactly. It easily pushes past 120 50s, often quite a bit higher. So yeah, perfect for taking advantage of those 144 hertz or even faster displays. Really smooths things out.
And that 16 GB of VRAM comes into play there too, right? Especially with textures.
Absolutely. The review highlights this. In games with really high-res textures, having that 16 GB buffer helps prevent stuttering. You know those annoying little pauses when the card runs out of memory?
Yeah, nobody likes those.
And it's becoming clearer, that 8 GB is starting to feel tight, even at 1440p sometimes. This 16 GB gives you more headroom for future games, too.
Good point. Future-proofing, kinda.
Uh,
But the review did say 4K gaming might require some tweaks.
yeah, that's fair. Pushing 4K resolution at high settings is probably asking a bit much for consistent high frame rates from this tier of card. Its real sweet spot is definitely that high refresh 1440p experience.
Gotcha. Okay, let's tackle the other big topic.
Right.
Ray tracing. How does the 7800 XT handle those fancy lighting effects?
Ah, yes, ray tracing. This is generally seen as an area where AMD's mid-range cards, this one included, are maybe a step behind their Nvidia rivals performance-wise.
So, weaker there.
Generally, yeah. The example given was Cyberpunk again, 1440p ultra settings, but with ray tracing turned on, frame rates drop down into the 30 to 40 fps range.
Oof, yeah, that's a pretty significant hit.
It is. So if you really want to experience ray tracing on this card, what are the options?
Upscaling, I assume. FSR.
Exactly. AMD's FidelityFX Super Resolution, specifically FSR 3.0 now with frame generation, becomes really important here.
Explain FSR quickly for those who might not know.
Sure, so FSR basically renders the game at a lower internal resolution and then uses smart algorithms to upscale it to your target resolution, like 1440p. FSR3 can also generate intermediate frames to further boost the perceived smoothness.
So it claws back performance.
It does. It can recover a lot of the performance lost by turning on ray tracing. There might be, slight image quality trade-offs compared to native resolution, but they're often pretty minimal, especially with the newer versions.
So the review said it performs admirably with upscaling.
Yeah, that was the word used. Basically, if you're willing to use FSR, you can get playable frame rates with ray tracing on in many games. It's just maybe not the absolute best ray tracing experience money can buy.
A reasonable compromise for the price, maybe. Did the review mention any games where it handled ray tracing better?
Yes, interestingly, a game like Control was mentioned. It seems the combination of the card's specific ray tracing hardware and maybe its AV1 decode capabilities allowed for pretty good visuals at decent frame rates, especially with some tweaking.
So it can do it, it's just not its absolute strongest point compared to raw rasterization speed.
That sums it up pretty well. Rasterization is where it really shines for the price.
Okay, moving beyond pure gaming. What about features, connectivity? What ports does it have?
It's pretty modern on that front. You get 3 DisplayPort 2.1 outputs.
2.1, that's the latest, right?
Yep. Huge bandwidth potential there. We're talking possibilities like 8K at 60 hertz or maybe more relevantly 4K at a crazy 240 hertz if you have a monitor that can even do that yet.
Future-proofing again,
Definitely. And you also get one HDMI 2.1 port.
which is good for TVs and many monitors too.
Right. Gives you access to things like VRR variable refresh rate for smoother gaming, ALM auto low latency mode, and EARC for high quality audio back to your sound system.
Covers the basis. What about the connection to the motherboard?
It uses a standard PCIe 4.0 by 16 slot, plenty of bandwidth there. And we mentioned the AV1 hardware decoding earlier. That's great for streaming video efficiently, like from YouTube or Netflix. It takes the load off your CPU.
Sounds like a solid modern feature set overall. Okay, let's talk software. Drivers are always important. How's the AMD Adrenalin software experience?
Gigabyte recommends the AMD Radeon Software Adrenalin 23.x series drivers, or newer, obviously. The review describes the software itself as pretty clean, intuitive, easy to find what you need.
And AMD's pretty regular with updates, aren't they?
Generally, yes. Frequent updates often bring performance tweaks for new games and bug fixes. The software also has useful features baked in.
Like what?
Things like Radeon Chill, which saves power when you're not moving much in-game. Radeon Boost, which can dynamically lower resolution slightly during fast motion to keep frame rates high. And Radeon Anti-Lag, which aims to reduce input delay.
All handy tools for tweaking your experience.
For sure. And for those who like to monitor things, there's a comprehensive performance overlay you can bring up in-game. You can save custom tuning profiles, and it even has automated game optimization settings.
Sounds quite feature-rich. Any downsides mentioned? Driver stability issues.
The review acknowledges that, occasional minor driver bugs can happen with any GPU driver, but it also emphasizes that AMD is usually pretty quick to release hotfixes to address them.
So generally a stable experience.
Yeah. The overall conclusion was that the driver experience is polished and mature now, which is crucial, right? You don't want to be fighting software issues.
Absolutely not. Powerful hardware needs reliable software. Okay, how about overclocking? The card has OC in the name.
Right. That means it comes with a factory overclock straight out of the box. Gigabyte has bumped the core clock speed up by about 50 millihertz compared to the AMD reference design.
And does that translate to much real-world difference?
According to the benchmarks in the review, it gives a small but measurable boost, something like 3 to 4% better performance in benchmarks compared to a stock 7800 XT.
A little extra speed for free, essentially. But can you push it further yourself? Is there headroom?
The review certainly suggests so, thanks to that good cooler we talked about and the robust power delivery.
The VRMs.
Exactly. There should be some room for enthusiasts to play. Gigabyte provides their AORUS engine software for tweaking clocks, fan speeds, power limits, all that stuff.
Any estimates on potential gains?
The reviewer mentioned potentially hitting maybe an extra 100 megahertz stable on the core clock and maybe 200 megahertz on the memory clock. But, Silicon lottery applies. Your mileage may vary.
Always the case with overclocking. Is there anything to make that easier or safer?
Yes, actually. There's a physical dual BIOS switch right on the card itself.
Oh, handy. How does that work?
It lets you switch between two different BIOS profiles. Typically, one is a performance mode, maybe with slightly higher default clocks or more aggressive fans, and the other is a quiet mode, focused on lower noise.
So you can flip between them easily.
Yep. It's great if you're experimenting and something goes wrong, you can just flip the switch back to the other BIOS. Or just choose between performance and quietness without messing with software.
That's a really user-friendly feature. Nice touch.
Okay, let's put this whole card in context, though. Big picture time. Who's its main rival? How does the value stack up?
The main competitor identified is Nvidia's GeForce RTX 4070. They occupy a similar sort of performance bracket and price point, roughly.
And how do they compare head-to-head?
It's a bit of a trade-off, as often happens. In pure rasterized gaming, so non-ray traced games, they often trade blows. The 7800 XT sometimes pulls ahead, especially in AMD-optimized titles.
But the 4070?
The 4070 generally has the edge when it comes to ray tracing performance. It handles those effects more efficiently.
And price. Usually a big factor here.
And this is key. The review suggests the RX 7800 XT often hits the market at a slightly lower price than the RTX 4070.
Ah, so potentially better value for pure frame rate chasers.
Exactly. If your main goal is getting the most 1440p frames per dollar, the 7800 XT looks very strong. But if ray tracing fidelity is super important to you, or you really want Nvidia's DLSS 3 frame generation,
then the 4070 might be worth the extra cost for some. Potentially, yeah. But the review really hammers home the value point for the 7800 XT, calling it exceptional bang for your buck, especially factoring in that 16 GB of VRAM versus the 4070's 12 GB.
Right, that extra VRAM could be significant, especially looking ahead. So summing it all up, who is the ideal customer for this specific Gigabyte 7800 XT?
The review points squarely at gamers who want consistently high frame rates at 1440p. People who value a really good, quiet cooler but don't want to pay those absolute top-end flagship prices.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But if someone really loves ray tracing,
Then they might still lean towards Nvidia, yeah. Unless they're happy using FSR upscaling to boost the ray tracing performance on the 7800 XT, which, as we said, makes it very competitive again.
it's about priorities, isn't it?
Absolutely. What about non-gamers? Any benefit there?
Well, the review mentions content creators, people doing video editing, 3D work. That larger 16 GB VRAM buffer could be really beneficial for GPU-accelerated workflows, handling bigger files, more complex scenes.
Good point. Not just for games, who shouldn't buy it then? Probably overkill if you're just a casual gamer sticking to 1080p resolution. You could save money and get something less powerful. But for that 1440p high refresh crowd,
Seems like a winner.
the final verdict seems to be that it strikes an enviable balance of performance, features, and price for that specific group of enthusiasts.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive pretty thoroughly, I think. We've really picked apart this Gigabyte Radeon RX 7800 XT gaming OC. And yeah, it sounds like a really compelling card, particularly for that 1440p gaming target.
Absolutely. You get a solid build, great cooling that's effective and quiet, good performance right out of the box with that factory OC, and even some headroom for tweaking.
And while ray tracing isn't perhaps its absolute peak strength,
AMD's upscaling tech, FSR, really helps bridge that gap, making it more than viable in a lot of titles. And considering the price and that all-important 16 GB of VRAM, yeah, it looks like excellent value for a serious 1440p build.
definitely. So, to leave our listeners with something to chew on, considering how fast things change GPU tech, game engines getting more demanding, how do you see this balance evolving? You know, the balance between raw power, these clever upscaling tricks like FSR and DLSS, and features like ray tracing, how will that shape the choices we all make for our next upgrades?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Something to keep watching.
Indeed. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.